Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Don Buerk, Associate Professor of History here at Defiance College. Welcome to our campus once again for another installment of Town and Gown. And so I guess, Randy, you're not going to introduce me tonight, so I'll just okay, so that's you know, what happens as you move on in seniority here. People care less and less about you, but we'll survive. Okay. So I'd like to begin tonight by mentioning that we're already planning our season for next year, so there will be another installment of Town and Gown, and I'd like to thank everyone for coming, and so hopefully this will be not only a learning experience for you, also for me, since I am at the disadvantage that many of you are not, and that is that I was not on campus as an eyewitness to any of this that we'll be looking at tonight, whereas many of you were. Now, that is no reference to anyone's age, I assure you, but as they say, facts is facts. All right. So tonight, take a look at something called A Hot Time in the Old Town. Tonight, the fires of Defiance College. And before we go any further with this, I need to really make special mention of my good friends and associates here at Defiance College who have really done most of the work and most of the research for me on this. And you see them here. They are Barb Sedlock, who works at the library, a tireless worker, and for many, many years here at Defiance College. Kathy Punches, our Director of Public Relations. Ryan Imbrock, Associate Director of Marketing. And Leah Hettinger, a student history major here at Defiance College, who's really put in a lot of work to make this possible. So, with that having been said, I'd like to carry on then and talk a little bit about our major subject tonight, and that is the fires of Defiance College. Now, let me say, first of all, there have been a number of these over the years. I'm not going to talk about all of them, just the major ones, the ones that you see on the screen here. So as I've mentioned, there have been numerous other fires. Fires, of course, are highly destructive. You know, that's an understatement. However, buildings can be replaced, and in all of these cases, they have been, more or less, with alternative structures. Buildings can be replaced, but personal artifacts, personal effects, memorabilia, and things of that nature more than likely cannot be. And so that is the real tragedy of fires. On the other hand, I have come to learn, as we'll see in at least a couple of these slides tonight, that fires, like any disaster or catastrophe, sometimes brings out the best in people, and that's a good thing. So there's always I suppose, a positive way of approaching this. So with that having been said, let's take a look at some of the major fires which have plagued the campus of Defiance College over the last half century or so. And this is one of my favorite photographs of the college because it does show the fine old arch there. And also, get my bearings here, we see Weston Hall. Weston Hall and Defiance Hall, and this is what, that Tenzer, which is still in existence today. Trowbridge, okay, thank you. Tenzer would be to the background. There we go. Okay. All right. So Weston Hall is quite interesting as I took a look into this, and it really contained a great deal of information, a great deal of storage, great deal of features that one might not necessarily think were at Defiance College at that time. And according to my notes here, it says the first floor of Weston Hall provided faculty offices and a men's gymnasium with a running track, dressing rooms, and locker area. And on the second floor were the administrative offices, classrooms, and a large chapel with a seating capacity of about 700 people. Now, the capacity of this room of Schomburg Auditorium is roughly slightly over 300. So if Weston had a facility with a capacity of 700 people, it'd be more than twice what you see in here today. So we'll take a look here at another interesting thing is how the newspapers tended to deal with the fires at that time. And you can read, I think you can read at least the headlines, if not the fine print. It says, I think it goes on to the next one then. Rebuilding fire-wrecked facility is considered as nearly impossible. Flames spread rapidly, break out near the stage. Only a brick shell was left. So. This is Weston. So what you want to go back to this image, and we see if you look directly through the arch, that is Weston. Is that right? Hmm? Yeah. Yes. Right. Okay, this is from the student newspaper at the time, the Tom-Tom. You see it says Sunday night fire wrecks 52-year-old Weston Hall. And this is, what time of year is this? This is November of 1960, so classes would have been in session there, presumably. So you can see the building there is completely engulfed in flames. Additionally, with respect to Weston, it additionally had a pipe organ, music studios in there, built on the ground floor, a stage, which it says is where the fire started near the stage, and an organ loft. On the third floor was the YMCA hall, which oftentimes was shared. The facilities were shared between the YMCA and Defiance College in the early days. It also had a Department of Household Arts, providing a cooking laboratory, a sewing room, a dining room. Okay, and so the cause of the fire, the gist of what this newspaper article says is that wiring near the organ was blamed for the Weston fire. There was some misinformation apparently that the Weston fire was caused by an arsonist because the police or the fire investigators called in an arson squad to look at it, but in fact that was not the case. The determination was that it was a wiring problem and not arson. And the individuals you see in this picture is there are a couple of members of the trustees there, but the man second from the left is, of course, Kevin McCann, who was president of Defiance College at that time. So it says rebuilding fire-wrecked, considered as, you have to put these two together. Rebuilding fire-wrecked college, Weston Hall, considered as nearly $1 million project. Okay. And this is courtesy of the Defiance Crescent News. So the building had to be demolished, and in due course it was. So this is what proceeded over the next several weeks. So in the early 60s, at the same time, President McCann was overseeing a number of building projects on campus. So as one building burned, others were being built. This particular one is the Kevin McCann Study Center, which would be what is today Hubbard Hall. The bookstore currently contains the bookstore and any number of offices. So as some buildings went, other new ones were designed to replace it. Okay, Defiance Hall, 1965. A fair amount of research has already been done on the fires of Defiance College, and there's a really neat scrapbook put together sort of in the old-fashioned way of pictures and images of Defiance Hall. And this particular one says that the replacement value of Defiance Hall is nearly $250,000. And one of the things that is sort of peculiar, as I mentioned, is that particularly at the time Defiance Hall burned, this is old Defiance Hall now, in the summer of 1965, was in the process of being remodeled. So just as it was undergoing a refurbishing, the whole thing burned and had to be ultimately demolished. The other thing, also, since the Weston fire and the Defiance Hall fire occurred very close together, a number of the artifacts that managed to be saved from the Weston Hall fire were stored in Defiance Hall and ended up getting burned that again. So it was just, you know, too many fires in too short of a time. According to reports, the three-story, give you a little background here on Defiance Hall, and is one of my great sorrows that I was never around to see this. It was a three-story brick Queen Anne style building and considered to be one of the most beautiful buildings in the area. The basement contained the commercial department, several laboratories, the bookstore, post office. First floor had administration offices, classrooms. The second floor contained not one but two literary society halls where literary study and competition took place. The library, of course, additional classrooms, and the entire third floor was the auditorium. So, in 1965, however, tragedy struck, and it suffered heavy fire damage at this time. And even newspaper reports at the time made mention of the fact that this was the fourth campus fire since 1901. There was a fund, a building campaign fund going on to raise revenue for replacing Defiance Hall even while it was still smoldering. So I'm not sure how that took place. This is what it would have looked like. Firefighters moving to try to solve this. Here's what the Crescent News had to say about it. Disastrous fire hits Defiance Hall. One of the things, too, is that originally Defiance Hall did contain the library, as I may have mentioned, but over the course of the years, the library and other facilities were moved to different buildings. And so it says that Defiance Hall was used only as a classroom administration building, and that as they moved the library collection, because the books were so heavy, it says steel rods had been used on the second floor of the second-story library room to help support the weight of the collection. And as so often the case, many people remember moving books from one library facility to another, which occurred yet again in the 1990s as the library moved from the Anthony Wayne building, from the Anthony Wayne Library, to its current location. So again, this is going on in the summer in July of 1965, the morning after, and fall classes just a month away. You know, what to do, what to do. And once again, the fire marshal determined that wiring was the problem. Another thing that I encountered again and again with respect to why these fires are occurring is that there sometimes were allegations that security on Defiance College was lax, and so that there were a lot of keys floating around to just about anyone, had almost unlimited access to buildings, to laboratories, and so on and so forth. And that certainly may have been the case, although I think that was not particularly unusual on college campuses at that time, and probably not to have a security officer was not out of the ordinary. Yes.
With regard to Defiance Hall, on the second floor were
right, right. Yeah, and no doubt about it. Yeah, when you know, a heavily oiled floor is going to really go up quickly, and much of that was actually used in Defiance College's advertising at the time, is that the buildings were of you know, high quality oak and that sort of thing. So that was very much part of it.
When you speak to the place up there that said Defiance Hall was the oldest building, was it maybe the oldest building at the time of that fire, but was it actually older than Weston Hall, or was it put up at the same time?
Weston Hall, no, Weston Hall dates back to Weston Hall dates back to 1908, and Defiance Hall dates back to 19. I don't have that date. So but they would have been roughly built at the same time, early 1900s, to indicate the dedication and the interest that the trustees and the people of Defiance had at that time for bringing higher education, and particularly a liberal arts education, to this part of the country. So they, in terms of their particular date, it would have, you know, been pre-World War I type of buildings. Okay, also some images of, we're still looking at Defiance Hall after its destruction. Here's the interior view of what the building looked like. The president at the time was Noel Johnston, and so he issued a statement pertaining to the fire, which he called a terrible blow. Of course, he does mention here in the second paragraph that we are thankful that no one was injured, and that through the quick work of firemen, staff, faculty, students, and other volunteers, our records and files were saved without great damage. So that was also a good thing for the college as well. Okay, another view of what's going on. The fire. We also, for the first time, have some color photography showing up, in which the third floor by this point is entirely engulfed in flames. Shortly thereafter, a new Defiance Hall was constructed after the old one underwent the wrecking ball. And another statement from President Johnson: Defiance needs you. They've already started a fund to replace the building. A new building was completed a few years later, the new Defiance Hall being opened in 1969, which served many of the same purposes for administrative as well as classrooms, faculty offices, and so forth. He does make mention of the fact here in the second paragraph. It says that we know that it will require approximately $300,000 to close the gap between our insurance recovery and the cost of restoring or replacing Defiance Hall. So the amount of insurance that the college had was not sufficient to pay for a new building. Sisson Hall. Underwent fire in early 1970s. And this is what it might have looked like at the time. And let me read to you here a quotation that I have lifted from Barb Sedlock and from What Happened to Sisson Hall. She writes this recently: the dedication of Sisson Hall took place on February 17th, 1911, which is roughly at the same time as the first two buildings that we've taken a look at. DC's men played a basketball game against Tri-State in the new gymnasium as part of the dedication events. Besides functioning as a dormitory, Sisson's basement housed a gymnasium with a balcony track, a swimming pool, shower facilities, tailor and barber shops, and locker rooms. The gymnasium was used to host regional high school basketball tournaments in the 1910s and 1920s. So here we see Sisson Hall, also being engulfed in flames. This is in the winter or in February of 1973. Students would have been in the dormitories at that particular time, being chased out into the cold. This is how it all occurred. So at this particular time, the fire marshal or local authorities did declare that the Sisson fire was a result of arson. And additionally, there were any number of activities designed to assist students who had lost personal effects during the fire. This happens to be a meeting of administrators and students discussing what to do, how to best get assistance, relief, additional clothing. So here's an activity in which clothing is being distributed to those students who had lost most of what they had, unfortunately, in the Sisson fire. Here's a collage that someone managed to put together describing the events of February of 1973. Here's how the student newspaper, The Defender, at least one of the stories written by The Defender, at that time. Theater future in limbo still. Bits and pieces collected, insurance information coming in for all those involved. There's another headline from the Defenders, Sisson destroyed. And of course, the inevitable deconstruction machinery will do their thing until Sisson ultimately looked like this. And back to the fire. Okay, so this one, fourth and finally, deals with the Enders Student Union. I'll just read to you what the notes that I have. It says the Student Council at the time when Enders Building was built chose to honor Dr. George C. Enders, Professor Emeritus of Religion and Philosophy, for his 50 years of service to the college by naming the new student the George C. Enders Student Union. Dr. Enders had come to Defiance in 1910, taught English language and literature, and in 1912 he became a professor of philosophy. He was then made the dean of the Christian Divinity School at the college in 1917 and taught many subjects to then. And the Enders Student Union was named in his honor. In 1997 then, again in the summer of 1997, the building caught fire. And it says that firefighters from 4 departments battled the July 10th fire, which gutted the second floor of Enders Student Union, above and to the right of that particular caption. So July of 1997, there would have been some people on campus, but obviously not as many as during regular school sessions. This happens to be from the Defiance College magazine. In 1998, plans proceed for a new union to replace Enders, although some of Enders was still being used. The entire building was not destroyed at that time, so part of it was still functional, but a new student union would have to be developed, have to be built, which would get underway shortly. These are just some scenes of firefighters. This is a good photograph because it indicates what offices were in Enders at that time, so it was more than just a student union building. As far as Enders go, the eyewitnesses that were there mentioned that there was very little to see. That was mostly smoke damage, and even then there's relatively little smoke, so the building seems to have been badly damaged with very little indication or very little evidence of that. And that concludes the slideshow. So, and as a result of the Enders Student Union building, we have replaced it with the Sarek Campus Center. Now, as I mentioned, there have been a number of other fires that have occurred on the Defiance College campus over the years. One of them was actually right behind me here not all that long ago in the 1990s. And there are other references to fires dating back really into the early 1900s. So that's, yes.
I noticed that one of the rooms in there was an Nautilus room.
Mm-hmm.
The Enders Union, I think, was dedicated by Commander Anderson of the USS Nautilus.
Okay. I think you're absolutely right. So in October 1958, Commander William R. Anderson of the United States Navy laid the cornerstone of the new building. So, and the Enders building, you know, dates only from 1958, so it would have been less than 40 years old at that time. Yeah.
Another thing, too, on Weston Hall, the auditorium there on Friday nights was a very good night for the students because we had movies.
Mm-hmm.
At that time, Kevin McCann was on the board of directors at 20th Century Fox. So we had a full cinemascope there, and we saw a lot of 20th Century Fox movies there that were basically first-run movies.
That's really cool. So this would have been late 50s?
58, 59.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yep.
Could I say something about Weston Hall?
Certainly.
We lived in it for 2 years,
Uh,
first floor.
okay.
And the auditorium in that building was very important. That's where the commencements had been held, where the recitals, student recitals, any program of that kind was held. And it was right in the center of the building, went upstairs and went into it. And when I stood and watched Weston burn, and to me, the most dramatic thing is I saw the stage go down, and on it was that concert gram that went all the way to the floor, and the organ. And talk about, the floors were all oiled in these buildings. That night, and then there was a gymnasium, as you mentioned, in the basement with a track. That was used for a number of purposes. For one thing, that's where we would have receptions and parties and that sort of thing. Have to carry the food over from Kilgore where it was prepared, take the dishes and take it back over there to wash and so on. The night of the fire, there was a play going on in there because it was used as a theater as well. And the fire department, unless this is a myth that is coming out of somewhere, was called out earlier to check out what somebody felt and they smelled something, thought it might be a fire. The wiring in there was, I mean, you would not believe, or the plumbing. It was all heated with radiators. And so this was the second call that night, and that time it was for real. And somebody who knows more about this, I'm watching the firefighters, I didn't think they had the equipment, whatever you call the big one, to take care of it. That precipitated the buying of a big one
Hmm.
to be used later. There was a radio station, the student radio station was in that building. And, you know, it was a very comfortable building, had a nice fountain out in front. We sort of felt like we were in the palace of Versailles.
Yeah.
Colored, lamps to light the. And it was such a traditional building. Classes started at 8 o'clock in the morning, well, 7 o'clock, which got everybody in our family up. Then have you seen the interior of Defiance Hall? You know, the fact that they considered trying to repair it, it seemed unreal to me. The
wooden steps.
Hollowed out, there were cables up alongside to sort of hold things together. I'm told that they weren't worth a nickel, but they sort of looked like they were. So those buildings were really, they would never pass any kind of inspection. Particularly with wiring and that sort of thing. And Robin called us in the middle of the night to say Sisson Hall is burning. And I said, how do you know? She said, because I'm there. So, you know, you can't think what to do, so they would pick back up and dress like they were going to school.
But you think on the Weston fire that the fire department had been called there and then went and left thinking that it was a false alarm?
I hate to disagree with my mother. But it was earlier in the week when they were, oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the fire was like on a Friday night. In fact, I think it was her birthday because she and my dad were playing bridge at Bob and Jay Bees, who lived on Clinton Street a block away.
Mm-hmm.
And, but earlier in the week, they'd been called to Weston Hall. And so when we heard the sirens and things, I don't think anybody was really too concerned until you saw the flames. And my dad and Bob Beeman, I don't know if there were other faculty members, climbed to the top of Tenzer Hall to make sure that there were not sparks and things that landed on the building.
Right,
We did from
right.
as well.
Hmm.
And when Defiance Hall burned, that's the only one I did not see. But it's kind of interesting because Noel Johnston, the president, supposedly had gone on vacation and before he left. He said, don't let any buildings burn down. And of course, while he was gone, some of them did. And then with
Well-
Simpson Hall, I lived in McReynolds Hall. I was a senior. I lived on the first floor and had been out until about 2 o'clock in the morning with our dorm mother, Mrs. Bailey, which was not unusual for her to take a bunch of girls down to the tip top. And so we came back and I'd gone to bed and I thought I was dreaming, hearing sirens and flames and things, and then realized that I was actually seeing them through the window of my dorm. And it was pretty amazing because most of the people in Reynolds Hall slept through this. I was awake, the girl who had been with us down at the tip top, Mrs. Fabian, and the RA, the student RA, they were awake, and Mrs. Fabian, and I don't know if anybody knew Mrs. Fabian, but she got us up and she took the 4 of us who were awake and some guys who were in the lounge, and she had a list of people in the dorm who did not have roommates. And it was a co-ed dorm, the 3rd floor was empty that year. And she had us go and wake up these guys who did not have a roommate and tell them the building was on fire, system was on fire, they were going to have a roommate.
Because the dorm rooms did not have phones at that time.
No. And we had a payphone at the end of the hall. And then we also got guys who had cars to drive over to Ender Student Union to pick up the students and bring them back to the dorm. And I mean, she had everything worked out. It was just like, you know, she had practiced this forever. And there was a basketball game the next night. She didn't want us to bother any of the basketball players. They were her favorites. But, you know, they took the guys to the student union and then brought them back to the dorm. And again, most of the people in the dorm didn't even know this had happened until they went to class the next morning. Nor did the people in the neighborhood, because when she called, Dick and I had heard those sirens. The fire department did not use their sirens that night. They did.
Yeah.
All right. Neighbors came to teach the next morning and was just astonished.
The building was gone.
Well,
The one that's fascinating is Sisson Hall because it was declared ours, and no one was ever persecuted. And the rumor is, and it's strictly a rumor, but it's pretty well, I think, substantiated, is one of the pranks that college students
department.
into the guy's room and then run. Well, that's what happened. The trouble was, the room that it was thrown
There's,
into,
nobody was
the guy
there.
was sound asleep. And the fire got going, and we had just that summer completely refurbished the interior of those rooms with wood paneling. And yeah.
Randy, was there a legally blind student? Is that Bob Kraus, I think was his name?
Was there a blind student here then?
Yeah, Bob Kraus, I think.
Yes, yes, there was.
You know, I was one of the people who slept through that fire. I was in one of those building calls, I can't remember which one, and Dwayne heard it and getting practical jokes on me for about the last 3 or 4 days. And here I am in bed, and he's banging on my door saying,
You-
"This house on fire." And I'm going, "Oh, yeah,
You,
oh, yeah."
you didn't,
Slept through it.
you didn't sleep through classes though, but you slept through the fire.
The gym was virtually unusable. If you've ever heard the tape that, well, I'm getting into too much. It was like this. But they had begun a theater in the back of the building. And that was a reference to the theater. And thinking that maybe you could save that part of the building.
Yeah.
When you asked about phones, when Dick and I came to Defiance College campus, there was a phone in Defiance Hall. We wanted a phone in our apartment, and there was a big to-do about this. And so we finally got a phone, and then they did put a phone in each of the dormitories. So, I mean, things were different.
Yeah, individual dorm rooms didn't get phones here until mid seventies. No, no,
Until I came in '86, and rooms did not have phones.
really.
There were hall phones. Until about, no, they weren't by that time. But
Hmm.
it was probably about 1988.
Well, you were supposed to study, not be on the phone. Jan?
John, this telephone situation was really nasty. I mean, it's hard to imagine in the day and age in which you can't walk in any classroom and you don't see 30 cell
Right.
phones, well, for problems trying to reach.
Oh, I know. I firsthand, believe me.
But the doom and gloom about all of this, I had students in the dormitory on the telephone issue as far as system was concerned. And one of the students who later became a board member here, Joe Matthews, talked about, wrote a speech on the fire and won the national championship. Because we were not the only school that was put in jeopardy because of the crummy telephone facilities in the dormitory. The other speech that won really a lot of national acclaim was when a student was downtown and there was an attempted rape, and she got into the room and pushed the materials against the door so the guys couldn't come in. And they couldn't get to the telephone. They were trapped in their room. And it was really a scary situation. She told me about it accidentally on she was in another event. She told the story of this attempted rape when we were on our way to Chicago with the speech team. That story was so compelling. I told her to get a tape recorder and tell the story again, and we would use it in a persuasive speaking contest in which she won a state championship and also went on to nationals with it. It was that scary as far as telephones were concerned. It was a terrible situation. But we were not the only college.
Very common.
Yeah, it was very common.
Ohio West, yeah, bad.
It was.
But we didn't know any different, right?
Right, right, yeah.
On my phone, I just, Merle Donnelly, age 19, 317 Rocky Fork Drive, is sentenced to 30 days in jail for setting a $700,000 fire that destroyed Sisson Hall on the Defiance College campus. That was from the Columbus Dispatch.
So he was charged with arson.
No.
Well, how,
He was sentenced to 30 days in jail for setting a $700,000 fire in less than Columbus dispatched out wrong, which is very possible.
okay, yes, ma'am.
What was the cause of the student union fire?
Cause of the student union fire. That,
They had several arson things, so one year was arson. Who remembers who was
right. Yes. And that individual was ultimately charged with like 30 or 40 different fires around the area. Yeah. Right. So he was a real pyromaniac.
Was he attending Defiance College or just happened to come?
I don't, yeah, no.
Is that the guy that was, he was actually in jail and went around on his work release and was setting fires? He was going in and robbing places. And, that's like the place over in Archibald, the candy. Yeah, Spangler's.
That's,
He would go in and rob places, and then he would try to set fire to them. Yeah, the guy was in jail, and, he actually went in out to Nelson and Bob's. Luckily, he didn't burn the place down, but he did rob some money, and the guy was on work release. He just going around lighting, setting fires to a bunch of places.
Don, one more thing.
okay.
Times have changed. Sally and I were dating and coming in as undergraduate students the night of the Weston fire, and they hustled us over to Trowbridge dorm, which she had a corner room facing that building, and they said, go in and help them move clothes and things out of that. And the dorm mother was so strict, I asked twice, are you sure? Come up out here.
All right.
You just were
Be-
to
because you didn't want to get any demerits. You,
Yeah, and Maxie, we were hoping that the grades did get destroyed.
yeah, right, right. Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say, if I had been a student, I would be hoping that the records would have been destroyed. Okay. Any other questions or comments this evening? Thanks again for coming, and hope you.
Follow up, it was not rule of arson, but it was rule of horseplay as
Yeah, right.
lining paper under the
So, arson, the charge of arson would have been a more serious charge. So it was a lesser, so technically it was not arson, even though it was deliberate. Okay.